And something I've really learned in my journey over the last couple years is the power of vulnerability. And it's one of the hardest things for us to do is to be real and to be vulnerable. And it's because it's scary. And so we put up these fronts, these pretenses, these different things. And really where life changes and the ability to not have to be perfect, to be vulnerable, to be raw, to be real. And so it takes a lot of vulnerability to get up here and sort of share some of your laundry. So thank you. But that's where real growth happens, is when we can be that way. I think most of the time, if not all the time, but especially with our partners, when we can say, hey, this is what I need. And I have to tell you, it's really hard for me to get down to needs. Like, it's hard for me to tell Gary, this is what I need. It's probably one of the hardest things for me to do. But I do need predictability. All right, so I guess Gary's getting us set up. What I'm going to talk about now is I'm going to go real quickly over this framework I've created, which is called the 10 P's to a powerful marriage, to a prosperous marriage. You put in your P word for your marriage you want. And what I've learned through a lot of my studies, and I learned this through my friend Jim Quick, Jim Quick is, has anybody heard of Jim Quick? Yeah, so some of us know Jim Quick. If you haven't seen anything of his, he's pretty remarkable. So what he is he calls himself a memory coach, but he's far more than that. That really minimalizes his expertise. He works with some of the top business people, entrepreneur, presidents, Dalai Lamas, whatever, entertainers, musicians, actors, really the most rich and famous in the world, to help them with their memory techniques. And he's really studied neuroscience and from the brain and understanding how the brain works. And it's so interesting. Since I got sick, I've studied the brain a lot, and we're learning so much about what we've never known about the brain, which is really, really cool and fascinating, and how much more control we have over our brain than we ever thought. But he studies the neuroscience of the brain. He's worked with Dr. Amen and all these doctors and these neuroscientists across the world and globe to understand, again, how the brain works. But then he's a master at the memory technique. So the cool thing about memory, especially those of us that are over 40 and maybe even over 50, when we start to think our memory goes bad, and it does start to change, and the neural pathways change, but we think, oh, our memory just goes bad, or oh, I'm just terrible at remembering things. And what I've learned through him is actually there's techniques for memorization, and when you understand the technique, we can all have a good memory. And it's like any technique or skill, you just have to really hone it and work at it. But he's just masterful. He's world famous and like a world leader in memorization. You can get him on the stage. He can remember 500 names in a room, backwards, forwards, sideways, give him any numbers, he can recite them. Anyway, but he's a big studier of mastery and technique. And so the way he says this is that the magic of life is always in the patterns. And those of us that have some Aji background, those of you, of course, you know what I'm talking about. We studied the fundamentals of business. We've studied a lot of fundamentals. So basically the same premise, but for the rest of us, it's just that there's always a pattern underneath any success. There's always a model. There's always a framework. There's always an infrastructure, something holding everything else up, that sometimes we can't see it, but when we study and get down, there's always a model. So it takes sort of the magic away. It's like watching a musician and they do all this crazy stuff. You're like, how the hell do you do that? And then, oops, I lost an earring. I normally don't wear any jewelry, so I don't know how to put these in. But it might not work. Oh, there we go. So it's like a musician that's doing all these magic tricks and you can't figure it out. You're like, how the hell do you do that? And then they show you the trick. You're like, oh, that's all it was? Like, really? Are you kidding me? It's really that easy. So that's pretty much life, is that when you understand that model that's underneath everything, it seems to be pretty easy, but it's figuring out what that model is in the first place. So in my journey of really studying, wanting my own good marriage, wanting to figure out this money thing, this money marriage piece, and in my own search for this, I've come up, and what I've found for me, and this is what I'm going to share with you, that the model for a great marriage is the 10 Ps. This is what I see as the magic, is that the secret ingredients, the recipe that's solid, that when we sort of I don't say master because we never master marriage, we never really master money, but being in the journey of these things and working according to this framework of these 10 Ps, we can continue to grow and evolve together. And Gary and I are in these 10 Ps all the time. And when I've seen and studied other marriages that are really successful, and many of you in this room, if not all of you, I think you'll notice too, like, oh yeah, you know, that's right. You know, we are pretty good at that, or we're in this path. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. And it starts as a triangle. So we all, most all of us, we had this wedding. And there's this problem with weddings today. And who's gone to a wedding lately? How many of us think it was about the marriage vows? Like everybody came there to watch the couple share their vows and their declaration of what they cared about and their commitments to each other till death do we part. Anyone? What was it about? Production. Yeah, anything else? Party, yeah, lots of party, drinking. And think how much stress was involved. And is anybody offended if I use bad language? Okay. Okay. Just getting permission again because, yes, some words will fly. So lots of production, lots of wedding party, but party. What else is weddings today? Does anybody know the average cost of a wedding? It's over $50,000. It is. $50,000 for a wedding. So what's happening is now on every wedding we've gone to, have they all stood somewhere at the front and said vows? Yes. So what are vows? They're promises. So we're saying these vows, but I think most of these vows are by rote. They were given to the couple by a pastor or pulled out of a poem book or whatever, but it's part of the production. It's part of the entertainment. So weddings to me have become entertainment and parties and very expensive ones, and people can have a great time, but maybe what's missing is actually the marriage piece, the wedding itself. So everything starts with promises, and that's really the foundation. That's why it's at the bottom of the triangle. It's the foundation of our marriage, our promises. But many times we say them and we forget them maybe 5 minutes after we, sign the dotted line. So we'll talk a little bit about promises. The next one is what? Did it come? Oh, sorry. So philosophies. So now we're going to continue to go up the triangle. So philosophies is about our beliefs, what we believe to be true. Now, are all of our beliefs true? Probably not. So when we get married and in our marriages and in our relationships, we have these beliefs. And sometimes we share the same beliefs, sometimes we don't. But we also have beliefs about marriage. So, and then we have beliefs about money. So getting to a really strong marriage is getting on the same page and understanding each other's philosophies, what we believe. The next one is psychology, and Scott came in to talk a little bit about psychology and our feelings, so we'll dig into this a little bit. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next. And then proficiency, we're going to dig into this one. Proficiency is a big one, and I think this is where we find a lot of friction in our marriage, because proficiency is about having the common framework or language or knowing the same basics about money. So one partner could be a venture capitalist, Joe, wherever you are, and another partner might stay at home. That's okay. But you can still have the same money proficiency. So one could be a CPA, and the other one can maybe not really care about the money at all, but at the same time, or have a lot of engagement with the money, but your proficiency's solid. You both know the money, the basics when it comes to your life. And that's what the goal is to have a same money proficiency so you can talk through this, work through this. You can have your moments, but you've got the basics, you've got the principles, you're on the same page. That's rock solid. And then the level of expertise beyond that is irrelevant. Like Gary does these spreadsheets and numbers and Excel things, and I'm like, oh God, kill me. Let's just talk about it, right? And they're beautiful, and I'm so grateful he takes all this time. But if I had to open a spreadsheet, I'd rather just slip my wrist. So, so that's the proficiency piece. The next piece is having a purpose, and so this is the purpose of our marriage. It's purpose is really important with the marriage. Many times, again, we get married, we have kids, we go through, we have the white picket fence, we're going fast, and we're just caught in our life, and we never circle around like, what's our purpose? What's our individual purpose? Because we're all individuals. And what's our purpose as a couple? So this is really important. So we'll really dig into the purpose piece. After purpose, what is it? Process. So, our plan. Thank you. So plan. So once we have a purpose and we know what our purpose is, we need a plan of action to get there. Purpose is the destination. The plan are the goals, the actions, the to-dos. And but purpose comes first. And we find many times we're in a lot of the to-dos, the plans. Then comes the process. So the process is where we're going to, will be most of the day tomorrow. So this is where we're really going to dig into the money piece. And we call this the money method. And this is where I'm going to maybe share a new way to think and act with our money. But the whole process of how we flow our money in our marriage and what our goals and how it fits according to our purpose and our plan. So after our purpose, then after our process, then we have practices. So we can have a process in place, we can have all this set up, we can have a lot of things automated, but after that we have to be in these practices. We need to be in practices with our money, and we need to be in practices with our marriage. This is a practice here, is taking that time out, that space to practice our marriage. Practice is an action, our marriage is an action. So we'll spend time on our practices. And then after practices is turning it into a pact. So pact is where it's like an addendum to the vows, to the marriage agreements. To the marriage vows. These are our agreements. These are sort of the rules of engagement of our marriage, if you will. But we're going to come with these pacts of, okay, moving forward now on this journey from this 3-day weekend, what are our pacts moving forward? And we'll establish those together. And then finally, after we do our pact, then we're going to talk a lot about partnership, and this is where it all comes together, is really being partners and talk about the power of that. And then we have a bonus P that we'll talk about later. So this is the 10 Ps to a powerful marriage. And what I'm going to jump into right now, any questions on that? So that's the 2 days. We're going to be really diving into these 10 Ps and working on each of them and having our own exercises and talking about them. And again, remember, this is your space. This is the space for your marriage, for you to start co-creating. And that's what this is about. We talk a lot about creation and business and entrepreneurship. And what's more fun is creating alone or creating together. So moving forward, like what this 2 days is about is this is about creation. This is about creating your life. This is about creating the life you want together as a couple. So it's co-creation. And the beauty of co-creating things is two minds together who care about the same thing. That's what we're going to be doing, is the co-part, is what do we want our lives to look like together moving forward? Let's co-create it. Let's draw it out, like both of us are, at the easel and with our paintbrushes and painting this together. So how this is all going to lay out is, I think it was in babe, do you know what year that I founded, that I trademarked Good Life? It was a long time ago. So since I was young, since I was, I think, in my late 20s, early 30s, I came from a pretty rough background. I had a rough life growing up. And so part of my dream getting out of that and growing out of it was I just visioned a good life, that there's got to be a better way. Like, get me out of this small town, small-minded thing, and there's got to be something outside of this. I didn't know what it was. I was young and very naive and had just really no real guidance or parenting or anything, so I had no clue what that would be other than it's got to be gooder. It's got to be better, right? Something's got to be good. And so once I went on my journey a little bit and, got a little bit older, like I said, in my late 20s, early 30s, I just thought, I think I'm starting to figure this out. Why we're here is to live a good life. And I never grew up with any religious background. I grew up really without much parenting and on my own from a very young age, without any real guidance, I guess. So lost. I was lost a lot and trying to figure things out, but really this desire, the seeker to try to figure things out, like naturally in me, and just looking the next place. Nope, that's not it. Oh man, I fucked that up really bad, or whatever the case is. But it was just on to the next and trying to find it. I finally got to the place like, I think why we're here on this planet without like anything, any framework, or especially sort of religious background or anything to help shape this for me, is to live a good life. Like otherwise, what's the point? So at that time, again, I was pretty young, but I thought, okay, well, if I want a good life, someday I'm going to own a business and I'm going to name it Good Life. Because that's what I want to do. I want a good life. So if I name my business Good Life, one day when I have a business, someday when, that will be my constant reminder. And back then, even though I just sort of always had that like entrepreneurial nature, I was selling Girl Scout cookies door to door and selling apricots at swap meets or whatever I could do to make money. So that was built in. But I thought one day I'm going to have this company called Good Life. So I went down and trademarked it. And this was long before Good Life was everywhere. So it was maybe 1994, 95, I don't know when it was, but a long time ago. So that was Good Life. And then, like I said, life happened. I'll tell some stories. And my intersection with my life in 2013 took me to the place of asking, what is a good life? I thought I knew what a good life was. But really what I thought was a good life really wasn't a good life, because fame, fortune, success really isn't enough. There's got to be something more to that, and having a near-death experience really, confronted me with that pretty quickly. But then I've moved since then. I've realized, like, oh, I think I have a better distinction for what a good life is. And a good life, to me now, I've renamed it, called a wealthy, wealthy life. So what I've learned from my own personal experience is that most of my life, because I grew up very poor. I started in a trailer home, is where my parents welcomed me home from the hospital to a teeny tiny trailer home, and grew up very poor, working class, and then we finally graduated, I think, to more of a working class poor than just poor, whatever that might be. And both my parents were alcoholics. It was a very rough environment. And my parents, both my parents abandoned both my brother and me at a fairly young age. And but we grew up very poor. And in school, I was very much the joke of a lot of ridicule. I'd be the one that they would say, "Oh my goodness, look at her high waters. She wore those same pair of jeans 3 days in a row." One time I was an athlete. I think that's what kept me sort of on the straight and narrow, because I was on that athlete all the time. And I had one bra, and it's the only bra that I had, and it's the only bra, and I was really embarrassed. I didn't have any mother to even talk about bras, and it was way too small, believe it or not. But I had one bra, and I had to start pinning it together with safety pins because it was falling apart, and that's the only one I had. And I was getting dressed on the bus or something. It was a boy and girl. We were both going to another town to play sports, and my jersey had gone over like this, and the safety pin was showing, and it was stained, like it wasn't a white bra anymore, it was stained sort of a tan color. I washed it, but it's the only bra I had. And I just remember breaking down. Now, I was pretty strong because, I was a survivor and pretty strong and didn't break down very often. And all the kids started saying, "Oh my gosh, her bra is falling apart. It's together with a safety pin. Can you not wash your bras? Oh my God, it's brown." And I just remember, and I was a star player, and I remember going basketball, again, believe it or not, I was a point guard and was really good, just fast and aggressive and took people down, and I was really mad. I took a lot of people down that game. But I remember breaking down in the locker room and the visitor locker room beforehand, and I actually had the worst game of my life. I broke down thinking, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is so horrible to have these people laughing at me and ridiculing me, and I can't afford a bra, and what am I supposed to do? And what I felt was, I was just so ashamed, just deep ashamed, and didn't know what to do. And so those are a couple of stories. So that's one, really memorable story for me. But that was pretty normal. That was the moment one story I really remember. But for me, what I was after, like my solution at that point, it started, I think, then, is if I had money, this wouldn't be an issue. All the other kids who have money, they're not made fun of. Like, they have the clothes, and they have the cars, and they have the labels, and they have all these things, and I don't. So my answer to life was money. So at that young age, I was like, I'm after the money. Stand out of my way. I don't know, don't know how much is enough money or whatever, but the rest of that childhood and young adulthood into adulthood was all about the money. Money, 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 money. And those of us that have some Algae Network background, how did that influence me? Money, 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 money. So top 1% or your shit sort of thing. So anyway, just that even like invigorated me more and gave me more justice and more reasoning that I was on that right money track. And so that's what I've been for most of my career. And, Gary and I have, before I got married to Gary, actually, I was on the money trail and was working. And my first marriage broke down a lot of the part because of the money. Number one, I was all about the money. Two, we had a lot of money differences, so we did not agree at all. I mean, there couldn't be two more opposite philosophies when it came to money. And we fought about money like knockdown dragouts with no ever resolution or coming close to the same page constantly. So really, even that money conversation, that money part was a huge influence, if not the number one factor of why that first marriage failed. And so after I got divorced, while I was married and going through this, I was primary wage earner. I was very ambitious. I was in real estate. I was number one in sales in Austin at a very young age. I was number one in the country. I studied with Gary Keller. I was after it. And the thing about real estate, anybody with some real estate background, you can make a lot of money in real estate, high income. And that was my solution, was the money. And it was all about income, income, income. And I got a taste of high income from a relatively young age. And it was just always more, and what to do. And, my kids didn't see me a lot, or I'd drag them around. Both of them grew up in the back of the car when I was showing houses and different things. So, but money, 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 get divorced. But what did I do when I had all that high income? Spend it all. Because I bought everything I couldn't have as a kid. I bought the big house in the suburb, more square footage than you ever need. Like, really, how much square footage do we need in a house, right? 2 car payments, kids in private school, fancy vacations. I mean, the American dream. I was living it, and I thought I'd made it. I mean, all these things other than the marriage was pretty rough, and, a bad marriage is not a good life. But anyway, the money thing was really good until I get divorced, and then what happens? Any guesses? Moved from the great big house in the suburbs to a small little duplex. Broke. Single mom. And real estate is 100% commission business, and you work weekends and usually nights, and now I'm a single mom of 2 kiddos, and I didn't have an income. But not only did I have an income, the divorce cost everything that I thought we had. But then I come to find out, because I abdicated the money and I thought it was all about income and just the more money you made, that solved all of life's problems, I found myself in a situation, my fault, because I wasn't paying attention. I didn't understand a thing about money. I thought you just made a lot of it and it solved your problems. That I found myself single mom, $100,000 of tax liens, because I was like, oh, another thing in real estate is they don't take your taxes out. So, it was news to me. So we spent all my money and Uncle Sam's money. So tax liens, credit card debt, over $50,000 of credit card debt. Still, I was paying for private school, and since I was income earner, I was the one responsible for almost all of the kids' fees, and didn't have a source of income because I didn't know how to rearrange my life in a way that I couldn't show property nights and weekends and couldn't afford the nanny anymore. And now the IRS, anybody had the IRS after you? It's not fun, is it? Is there anything more stressful? There's not. It's they don't mess around. So, and so much so at that time, actually, going through the divorce, finding out this situation, dead broke, 2 kids in this teeny tiny duplex, trying to figure things out, had no clue, in this total moment of despair. I was so stressed out. I had my first panic attack that I remember driving my kids and having to pull over because I didn't know what it was, but I thought I was having a heart attack and I couldn't see, and I called a friend. I said, I don't know what's happening to me, but I have my 2 kids in the back of my car and somebody needs to come pick my kids up. So that was pretty scary. The next day, I was actually in a room. I was, going to some sort of mini workshop or something for real estate. And I was in this workshop, and this was before Gary and I got married, and he remembers it from an observer point of view, and I don't even remember him being in the room. But I was in this real estate workshop, and everybody was sitting at the tables and working, and there was a break. And so it was the first break, and I was sitting down, and I stood up, and the world went blank. And it wasn't a faint blank. It's the weirdest thing. I can, again, remember this to this very day because it was so unusual. But my eyes went blank, but then my vision came back, but I was paralyzed. So I'm standing there, kid you not, and I hear this screech in my ears. Like, has anybody been, heard a train screech, just hitting its brakes, that screech? So I hear this screech, like a train on train tracks, screeching through my ears. I'm stuck in my head. It's like a nightmare that you've had where you can't wake up or you can't say anything. Have you ever had those dreams? So I hear this screech, and then I'm in my head thinking, I can't move, I can't talk. And in my head, I've never told this story publicly. In my head, my lips are closed, I think. I don't know what I look like from the other side, other than most people are out of the room, but I'm stuck there. And someone was on my side. I don't remember who it was, but I'm thinking in my head, somebody help me. And I'm trying as hard as I can to say the words help me, but they don't come out, just like a dream. And I'm trying to say help me, but no words are coming out. And I'm just trapped in my own head. The screech had was gone by. And then finally, I'm trying so hard in my head to say help me. Finally, the words came out. And took me to a hospital, did all these tests, all this craziness. And they really don't know what happened. What they called it was a stress stroke. And all the doctor said is that it looked like such a severe case that I was lucky to be alive, because what happened is I was under so much stress, and we have a doctor in the room, so she could probably give the medical things that happened. But they said I was under so much stress that my brain and body were basically disconnecting, checking out, just saying, can't do it, time out, done. And so it was a stroke that was caused by stress, and they said the only reason I probably came through it like I did is because I was otherwise pretty healthy and strong and fit and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's part of being in this time of life where it was horrific, and I was scared. And now, not only I'd vowed so hard to keep my kids from the life that I grew up from, I just wanted them to have something so different than what I experienced. And then here I was providing the same thing: a broken home, dead broke, don't know what I'm going to do. And I just thought, no, this is not the life I wanted for myself or my kids, for that matter. So it's at that point I vowed to go learn the money thing, to really learn it. That I learned at that point that I finally figured out that, it's not about income. I made a lot of that, but it's more about, it's got to be something other than income. So I went to study the framework, or the business, the model, the recipe or whatever of money and business. And Aji was a really big part of that learning for those of us who have gone through it. So Toby and all the stuff we studied in Aji was really impactful. But it had its limitations and some of its dysfunctions too, that it's sort of, that I inherited. But the point is that that whole wealthy piece was going after the money. That was my first, let's say, mini breakdown. And then coming after 2013, and then this near-death experience I had, and coming out of that, I realized, all the money in the world doesn't matter if you don't have your health. All the money in the world doesn't matter, all the wealth in the world, let's say at this point. I'd already learned the income doesn't matter. That's all a wealth game and not an income game. And how much income we make really is not that important. It just sort of amplifies the velocity from which we can build our wealth. But outside of that, it's not about our income. It's about wealth. So that was the first lesson. So on the building wealth track, but again, it was so much loaded towards the money that when I lost my health and I realized I might not live, and coming, and then being on the other side of that, then I realized life is actually about this piece. A good life is being wealthy. It's being well, it's feeling well, it's having relationships that are well. It's all in the wealth. And true wealth really is this. But usually these are taught separately. Again, just like the marriage and money, there's the marriage stuff and then there's the money stuff, and they never really intersect it, in a way that we could work them together. On the wealth and wealth piece, it's the same thing. There's a lot of people talking about money, and there's a lot of people talking about wellness and these different things, but we don't hear a lot the two connected together. And I think it's sort of the yin and yang, or these puzzle pieces that fit together like this, because the focus needs to be wealth. The focus needs to be this side. That's the focus. That's the journey. That's where we're going. But this piece funds this piece. So this piece has to be in the equation. So what people don't tell us is that's great. We need all this wellness and stuff. But if we don't have the money to fund it, it's hard to actually feel really well and have relationships that are well. So it's these two pieces together that's the secret, that it's building those. So that's the journey. It's even moving, it's not moving from a good life. That's still like what I'm after, but it's having a new context. It's in the context of wealthy, wealthy. And then finally, where we're going to be talking this afternoon is what I call my 7 F words. So I give lots of names to things because that's how I remember them. And Jim Quick's taught me that too, is that when you can create things that are memorable and put things in some sort of frameworks, whatever, so you can remember them. And so I have all these crazy names. You'll see lots of naming, but that's for my sake, not to be clever, but so I can actually remember them, embody them, and hold them, and use them, and work with them, and teach them. But the 7 F words, I'm like, yeah, F words, like they do have a sort of that heaviness to them. But here's the 7 F words to live in a wealthy, wealthy life. And it starts, really no order, but I put them in this order for a reason. But it starts with faith, and I'll talk a little bit more about this too in the journey of faith, but it is about faith and spirituality and how we work that in our lives and our marriage. It's about family and friends, all of our relationships. It's about feelings. Now, feelings, how we feel. And feelings, many times people will put it's about diet and exercise or whatever it is about feeling good. And feelings are, I'll tell more story there too, but feelings are much deeper than that. Feelings are how we feel mentally, psychologically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally, but there's lots of feelings in there, and we need to be aware of those and spend time on those and talk about them and get in alignment with them and okay with them. And then fun. A lot of us in this room might not be as good at the fun piece, since we all tend to be a little ambitious or whatever. At least one spouse in the room isn't as fun as we'd like them to be. So, but fun, we need to have some entertainment. We need to have some pause, but that's part of the wealthy, wealthy life. Flourish is about self-growth. So we'll talk more about that. Philanthropy is giving beyond just ourselves, and then the finances piece. So the blue here, these are the wealth pieces. This is where we want to build this wealth, and then the finances is what funds this piece. So this is the framework we're working on. And then really how we break these down is usually feelings, family, and finances are the big 3 where we spend most of our time and where we tend to feel out of balance. Like these are the three main ones. So this is all the framework, all what we're going to be doing on the wealthy, wealthy. So in starting with promises, let's start back to our vows. So your exercise is actually going to be, I'm going to talk just for a very short period of time, but now it's going to be break time for you. The exercise is going to be for you to look at your vows, to remember them or recreate them. So whatever's been the past from today is the past. Really what I invite you to do with us here this weekend is to be present here today. That's another life lesson, is to be present. But is to be present in this moment and just use it as sort of the sacred place that you're giving to yourself and to your spouse and then to the two of you together. And the rest of the time is to invent your future. Take some of the past that you maybe want to take with you, but the rest of it's all about inventing the rest of the future that you want with your spouse. Or if you're single, the singles in the room for what you want for your life, and maybe a partner, assuming that you want a partner in the future as well. So let's look at promises real quickly. So promises, what are our vows? What's the standard vow that most of us say at our wedding? Love, honor, and cherish. So it's to love, honor, and cherish, which is great. Gary, I love, honor, and cherish you. Does that mean anything? You don't know? Sound good? So what is love? What does love mean? Let's break each of these words down and give them meaning. So as we co-invent these moving forwards, we reestablish our vows or reinvent new vows, we can know we have some words, some meanings to the words that we're using that are the same. So what is love? in the context of marriage. So what love is sort of the meaning of this word is what we're saying is it's, Paul, I love you the way you are, and I love you the way you're not. So many times we're good at the first half. What are we not so good at? The second half. So especially we as women, I love you the way you are, and I want to change these 10 things about you. So I love you the way you are, and I love you the way you're not. That's what love really means. And it's accepting, you know, we're all unique, and we don't want somebody just like us anyway. It's really great to have, you know, the dynamics and that we're different, and we bring different talents and different things to the table. And it also can bring fun. So part, I think, of the marriage is to be able to be self-deprecating, to laugh at ourselves. And you know, Gary can poke fun at my OCD, you know, tendencies. And we can laugh about that, right? Like, he's like, okay, I love you, you OCD control freak. The way you're not, you know, not that. So, but that's, I love you the way you are, and I love you the way you're not. There's also what's called reciprocal vows, and that's great. So let's say, Paul, I love you the way you are, and I love you the way that you're not. But what if Paul's a real shithead all the time? It makes it really hard for me to love him. Right? So there's the reciprocal vow that says, I love you the way you are, and I love you the way that you're not. But the obligation of Paul is to be lovable, honorable, and cherishable. For him to be lovable. So the obligation is on each one of us individually to make it really easy to be lovable. You know, versus bitchy and crabby and short and controlling and whatever the case is, which we're humans, so those things are going to, you know, happen. You know, we all have our bitchy moments. Women, we have an excuse. It's called PMS, so, you know. But the thing is it is an obligation we get married to be lovable, honorable, and cherishable, and make it as easy as possible for our spouse to love us. So that's called the reciprocal vows. Then there's the honor piece. So to honor someone, something, or someone, especially to honor means to hold in high regard. One thing that is so special about Gary in our marriage, for me personally, I know the man honors me. Like, he holds me in such high regard, both publicly and privately. Like, any of you that spend any time with Gary, like, does he not speak my virtues constantly? Like, I'm like, babe, tone it down. I'm really, but it's to honor your spouse so much where you want to talk about them, not in a way that it's annoying, but when, you know, in the right context, but where you want to, you're so proud of your spouse for any number of reasons. So that's what to honor is to hold in this high regard, to appreciate them and to respect them. Yeah, absolutely. Be their number one supporter and cheerleader, 100%. So that's what to honor is. I love that, to be the cheerleader. And to really support one another. Like, yeah, I'm behind you. And, you know, again, in this event, I'm up here talking, but none of this is possible without Gary. Zero. I mean, we would not be here today if it weren't for Gary, because he's just my number one supporter. He's like, babe, whatever you want, I've got your back. And vice versa too. But, you know, in this situation, it's like, what do you need me to do? I'm here. But it is that number one cheerleader, that number one supporter. And then what is to cherish? To cherish is to care for. So when we cherish something, like our animals, or remember kids, we'd cherish those little things we'd have. And cherish means we'd care for. I remember I had this little Barbie doll. It was my one, you know, I had like one toy. And I had this Barbie doll. And I mean, you'd think that thing was gold, because I cherished that Barbie doll and dressed her and did all these things and took care and put her in a safe bed at night and all these things. Just cherish, to care for, take care. So when we cherish our spouse, that means we care. Care like in action, emotion like I care, but care is in action. It shows up like I care for you. You'll hear me talk a lot about Gary this weekend. He probably is not going to expect it. But it's another thing about our marriage why I just adore the man, because every day it's some act of care that he offers me. You know, and sometimes I don't even deserve it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, he's just the way he does dinner, every little thing is the care is there. Like the care is an emotion and the care shows up in the action. But it's to care for and to protect. So especially as mothers, we know what it feels like to care for our kids and want to protect them. Like women, especially with our children, we have this desire to protect our kids, sometimes too much so. But that's to protect. But same with our spouse, is to want to protect their well-being, their interest. And I think this is very natural with women to their wives, is to protect their wives. And we as wives, especially type A, successful, ambitious ones, it's really important to let our husbands do that for us, because it's very much a male tendency, is to want to protect their wives. And we were even talking about earlier, as sons grow up, is that my son Kale, it's really, he was my small guy that I protected for, so much of his life, and now he's the protector. He's like, don't mess with my mother. Like, I can argue with her and fight with her, but you better not. So I think it's this man thing, this need to protect, and we as women to let them do that. So to love, honor, and cherish, have means to the words, and to vow them every day, like to act with them every day. But that's the very bottom of the triangle. It's the foundation. Everything rests on making our promises and keeping them every single day. And when we mess up, is apologizing and going back to the vows and going back to remember, like, why am I in this marriage? What is it? So to love, honor, and cherish. And there's just a few other pieces to that, especially in the lovable, honorable, cherishable, and love, honor, cherish piece. Is in that part of the promises are to be a good companion. Like part of the obligation is be easy to be around. Make it easy to be around, like easy to love, but fun to be around. Another thing I love about Gary, he makes me laugh. The guy's hysterical, and I'm just always laughing out loud. He's so freaking funny, and it's like, oh my gosh, my life without that laughter all the time, and that sarcasm and sense of humor, it's really, really funny. Spend some time with Gary, and he's hilarious. And get him in a room with someone else like David that has that, and the two, they could be up on, stage in some sort of comedy act. But it's to be a good companion. The second piece to it is to be intimate. And not intimate, like sex intimate. That's part of being a good companion is, the sex is important, so you certainly want to build that in. And Gary, certainly will say he doesn't think he gets enough of that, but that's another story. But not intimate sex, intimate like holding hands, intimate like hugging, intimate just touching like I care. Sometimes we don't need to say words. Sometimes words are too much, just intimacy. For men to women, one of the most intimate things you can do for us is what? Make you breakfast, yeah. Listen. Probably the most intimate thing you can do for us is not solve our problems, not tell us what we should or shouldn't do, not give us the answers. We don't need that. We're smart. We just need you to listen to us. Listen to our feelings. Listen to what we're thinking. Just listen. That's intimacy. Listening is intimacy. And listening is not hearing. Listening is actually being caring about what the other person is saying and just listening, not necessarily even have to reply. Sometimes when I want to kill Gary, it's because he's not listening. He's just trying to answer what I'm saying. It's like, stop that. You don't have to say anything. I just want you to listen to me. But listening is very much intimacy. The third part of love, honor, and cherish is to grow old together with a plan and a purpose. But that's the idea, like this is the journey, like to grow. Part of what we're doing is we're growing old together. And that feels better, just to know that you have a partner through life to grow old together. Because I know, probably all of us, as we get older, things change, and it's nice to have a partner to grow old with. But it's an intention to grow old together. It's not like, hey, we're married and whatever. Like, it's purposeful. It's looking at the end. It's like we're going to grow old together. And so we're in that together towards that growing old until the day we're not here anymore together. But it's growing old with a plan, with a purpose and a plan. But grow old together. The next one is to build wealth. One thing we don't want to be is old, sick, poor, and alone. Right? That's not what we want to be. So we want to build that wealth piece. And especially the older we get and not having the resources, it just makes life really hard, and it gets harder as we get older. And then the final piece of our vows is to really enjoy the journey. We're partners in this. Enjoy the journey as mates. Like Gary's my best friend, and that's what's so awesome is we're just in the ride together. And the ride's had some amazing highs, and man, it's had some really, really horrific lows. But you know what? I wasn't alone in that. Like, it's just enjoy the ride. We're in it together, and let's just make this journey worth something. Let's make it meaningful. Let's give it meaning. Let's know what that meaning is, and let's say, why are we here, and why are we married, and how do we love, honor, and cherish one another? So that's promises. That's the framework. So now it's your turn to either, like I said, just rekindle your vows, write those down, or, like I said, co-create, reinvent, and redesign your new ones. Tamara?